You ever hear about the church that rose out of the ocean? Not an island, not a wreck, but a full cathedral, glowing like moonlight on glass, towering above the waves before sinking right back into the Atlantic. That's what sailors called the Bermuda Cathedral. Sounds like one of those sea tales old men tell after too much rum, doesn't it? But I'll tell you right now, this one's different. Too many men saw it. Too many records vanished after they spoke. You can call it myth if you like, but I've been chasing this story my whole life, and every time I think I've found the end, the sea swallows another piece of it. So settle in, kid. This isn't just about a ghost ship or a mirage. It's about a place that shouldn't exist. A cathedral that rose from the depths, sang to the heavens, and disappeared before dawn. The first sighting goes back to 1892 from a British merchant vessel called the Argenta. They were en route from Barbados to New York, passing near the Bermuda Triangle when the sea went still, flat as glass, not a ripple in sight. Then the fog rolled in. According to the captain's log, the air glowed faintly, like someone had lit a lantern beneath the water. The lookout shouted that he saw towers, stone spires, ornate and massive, piercing through the mist. Within moments, the entire crew stood at the rail, staring at what looked like a Gothic cathedral rising from the sea. The captain described windows that shimmered with blue light and bells that seemed to ring from somewhere deep below. But before anyone could react, the fog thickened, the glow dimmed, and the church sank, slow, deliberate, until it was gone. When they reached port, they filed a report. The Admiralty dismissed it as an optical illusion caused by light refraction and heat haze. But the captain never sailed again. He said he kept hearing the bells every night before sleep. 50 years later, another report surfaced, this time from a U.S. Navy patrol in 1943. It was wartime, and the crew was running sonar tests near Bermuda when their equipment started picking up what looked like a large symmetrical structure beneath the surface. At first, they thought it was a sunken ship, but the sonar outlines didn't match any known vessel. The object was too big, with angles too clean, almost architectural. Before they could investigate further, a massive surge of magnetic interference knocked out their instruments. Then, as one sailor wrote in his log, a white light rose from the sea like a lantern in fog, shaped like a crown. 3 men swore they saw the outline of a roof, complete with flying buttresses, like a cathedral underwater. The Navy classified the report and transferred the crew to separate ships. Only one sailor ever spoke again. He said, "It wasn't a building we saw. It was something alive pretending to be one." Now, some say the Bermuda Cathedral is just a mirage, what scientists call a fata morgana. That's when layers of warm and cold air bend light, making distant objects appear closer, floating, or even upside down. It happens in deserts and at sea. But here's the problem. There's nothing out there to reflect. No islands, no wrecks, no land masses for hundreds of miles, and the descriptions are too consistent. Same shape, same glow, same impossible bells. That's what caught the attention of Dr. Helen Graves in 1978, an oceanographer from the University of Miami. She led a small research expedition to the area after reading through maritime logs that mentioned singing waters. They deployed hydrophones, underwater microphones, and for 6 nights straight, they recorded faint harmonic tones echoing from the deep. When they analyzed the data, The sound pattern matched that of church bells slowed down 20 times. On the seventh night, the signal stopped abruptly, and the sea around their vessel began to rise and fall in gentle, rhythmic waves, as if something enormous was breathing beneath them. Graves never published her findings. Her funding was cut, her tapes confiscated, and her notes went missing from the university archives. But one of her assistants, a man named Daniel Reyes, made copies of her field logs. He claimed the recordings weren't natural. He said the frequencies lined up with seismic readings taken years earlier when tremors were recorded in that same region. The problem? Those tremors didn't come from tectonic plates. They came from a fixed point under the Atlantic shelf, something man-made. Reyes went public in 1981 talking about what he called the resonance structure, a metallic anomaly buried deep beneath Bermuda waters. A week later, he was found dead in his apartment. The cause was listed as cardiac failure. He was 33 years old. I first heard about the Bermuda Cathedral from an old fisherman off St. George's when I was your age. He said his grandfather had seen it once, glowing in the distance while he was out catching snapper. The sea had gone still, and he said it felt like the world held its breath. He rowed closer, thinking it might be a ship on fire. Instead, he saw stone walls, huge and covered in coral, rising like a ghost from the water. He said the stained glass looked alive, showing images that moved inside the panes. Scenes of ships sinking, men praying, stars falling, and then, without warning, the entire structure folded in on itself, as if the sea swallowed it whole. When he told his story in town, everyone laughed until one of the other fishermen mentioned hearing bells that same night. The strange thing was, the tide that morning had shifted backward for almost an hour, flowing inland instead of out. You see, the Bermuda Cathedral isn't just a story about the sea. It's about something ancient hiding beneath it. Some believe it's the last remnant of Atlantis, its temples resurfacing once every few decades when the stars align just right. Others think it's a time slip, a fragment of another world overlapping with ours for brief moments. The religious folk, though, they have a different take. They say it's divine, that the cathedral appears as a warning, a sign from heaven for those who dare to look too deep into the ocean's secrets. There's even a passage in an old maritime diary from 1914 that describes a floating church of light near the same coordinates, written by a priest who was traveling to Nassau. He wrote, "It rose from the sea as if God himself was reminding us that faith is not bound by land." The page after that entry was soaked in salt water. The diary was found floating near a lifeboat. 3 days later, the priest was never found. In 2009, satellite imaging picked up something strange near Bermuda. For exactly 12 minutes, a reflective object roughly the size of a football field appeared on the ocean's surface. Before vanishing, analysts dismissed it as a glitch, but amateur researchers matched the location to historic sightings of the cathedral. When divers from a private exploration team attempted to reach the coordinates, their equipment malfunctioned as soon as they descended below 200 feet. One diver later described hearing faint music through his comms, even though the channel was silent. "It sounded like a choir," he said, but the notes were backwards. They aborted the dive after one of the divers started convulsing, claiming he saw lights moving under the seabed. The footage they recorded that day was corrupted, though a few frames survived. It showed what looked like a massive arch made of coral and metal, carved with symbols no one could identify. Now, I've seen a lot in my years at sea. Things that make you question what's real and what's just your mind trying to make sense of the deep. But the Bermuda Cathedral, there's something different about it. The sea changes when it's near, quiet, reverent, almost sacred. There are no gulls, no wind, no sound, except that distant hollow bell. Some say it's a portal, a doorway between our world and something older. Others say it's a memory, replaying itself through time, an echo of a city that once stood before the oceans rose. But what if it's neither? What if it's both? A fragment of the divine trapped in the deep, rising only when the world above forgets it exists. I've spoken to men who swear they've seen its glow from the deck of passing ships, and they all say the same thing, that for just a moment, when the light hits the water, they felt at peace. Then, just as quickly, the sea turned cold. To this day, no one knows if the Bermuda Cathedral is real. The coordinates shift with every retelling, and the evidence, photographs, sonar readings, eyewitness reports, always seems to vanish as fast as it appears. But the stories keep coming. Fishermen still whisper about the lights. Pilots report strange radar echoes, and deep-sea sensors still pick up vibrations that sound eerily like ringing bells. Maybe it's science we don't yet understand. Maybe it's the past trying to resurface. Or maybe, just maybe, the ocean remembers more than we think. So if you ever find yourself sailing near Bermuda, and the sea goes still, and the fog begins to glow, don't look away. You might just see it for yourself. And if you do, listen closely. If you hear the bells, don't linger, because some things rise from the deep not to be found, but to be remembered. And if this story made you wonder what else might be hidden under the waves, leave a comment below. Tell me if you think the Bermuda Cathedral is a mirage, a message, or something divine. And if you enjoy stories like this, you know what to do. Subscribe. There's still so much out there the ocean hasn't given back. And maybe, just maybe, we'll be the ones to find it before it sinks again.